The views expressed in this interview are those of the individuals and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, the U.S. Navy, or the Naval Postgraduate School. Welcome to the Trident Room, brewer of stout conversation, unfiltered and on tap.
On today's episode, Trident Room host Sydney Murkins sits down with Lieutenant Colonel Chris Dellow.
Hello, Trident Room Podcast. This is your host, Sydney Murkins. Today we have a very special guest on. We have the International Affairs Program Manager, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Dellow. We're going to be doing a follow-up from our last episode with the Program Advisor, Ronel Morales. Lieutenant Colonel Dellow, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sydney. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell our guests a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I came into the Marine Corps as an infantry officer, and I started out as a platoon commander at 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. I then went to a small craft company, which is now defunct, but working riverine issues primarily in South America, but then we actually did deploy and take the boats to Iraq. From there, I went down and worked counter-narcotics for JADF South for a couple of years. And then I was a company commander at 1-3, and then I was selected for the FAO program from there. So that's kind of when my FAO life started, and I went to, of course, NPS and DLI for French, and then went over to Morocco for in-region training. And from there, I came back to be an OPSO for the 22nd U, and then from there, went to KAOCL, which is also now defunct, the Center for Advanced Operational Culture and Language. And that was kind of, that was my payback tour for being a foreign area officer, and I really didn't, that's kind of where I decided, hey, I want to do this, but I think we need to change a few things. So I guess we can get more into that later. But from there, I was selected to be the exchange officer in Argentina. And I got sent out to Argentina for 2 years, and then came up here, and I came and took over this job in the summer of 2019. So I've been here for 3.5 years.
Awesome. It sounds like you spent maybe most of your, or half of your career at least overseas doing FAO-type things.
Yeah, about half doing FAO-type things, definitely.
Okay.
Working between joint and international billets, so yeah, about half.
Okay, awesome. I know last time we talked to Ronel about all things FAO. Today we're kind of talking about new initiatives in the FAO pipeline and, RAOs and FASs potentially as well. Sounds like you're the perfect person with all the experience to talk about those things. So within the past few years, the Marine Corps has published a few new documents: Stand-in Forces, Force Design 2030, Talent Management 2030. So I was really just hoping to talk to you about all of that today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things that all of those documents have in common, and even if you ratchet it up to national level documents, everybody right now is recognizing the importance of allies and partners. And we're also recognizing that our military cannot cover the entire world, right? There's threats from all over the world, and threats maybe is the wrong word, but there's competition space all over the world. And so in order for us to be able to actively compete and to maintain what we see as the correct worldview, you have to have a close network of allies and partners. We have to be able to partner with people that are willing and able to help to help us to compete. So I think that absolutely boils down to the Marine Corps needs to have a community of foreign area officers, foreign area staff NCOs that can be that strategic enabler for the service in order to maintain and develop those partnerships with our foreign counterparts, our allies, and our partners.
Yeah, absolutely. I know at MPS we have foreign exchange students, so I think everyone recognizes the importance of allies and partners. And from my understanding, the Marine Corps is the only branch of military that has yet to shift from the dual-track pipeline for FAOs to the single-track pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think It's something that has been talked about in the Marine Corps FAO community, at least since I came in 12 years ago. And the Marine Corps certainly has reasons for maintaining the dual track. There's a lot of senior leadership that believes that the ability to go back and forth to bring that FAO goodness back to your primary MOS and back into the fleet is a great thing. And while I don't disagree with that, I think we're getting to the point now where senior leadership is starting to realize that there is benefit to that, but we're also leaving a ton of experience and specialization really on the table. So we have been moving towards that direction. Again, we have a fair amount of support going up from the 3 and even 4-star level. That something needs to change in the FAO program, that we need to do a better job of managing the talent that we have and getting people in the right place at the right time. But it's a difficult process to navigate on how to make change. Even in the Marine Corps right now, where making changes is something that seems to have the attention of everybody, but there's still a lot of bureaucracy and there's still a lot of time that is required to do this stuff. So we're looking at it, and I think that we will probably have an answer, either yes or no, in the next year. I'm hoping that it's yes, but ultimately it's a decision that the senior leaders will make on what they think is best for the Marine Corps and what they think that they actually need out of foreign area officers. So, like I said, we're teeing that up, and I'm hoping in the next year.
Yeah.
A better idea.
Absolutely. So there's definitely pros and cons between staying dual track or moving to the single track pipeline. Can you tell us what the difference between the two, tracks are for those that don't know? Just explain how maybe the Navy and the Army do their single track versus the Marine Corps' dual track.
Sure. So, it's as simple as it sounds. In the Army, when you're selected to be a foreign area officer, that's what you're going to do for the rest of your career. There's different billets, different career milestones that they have as they go up, but you are considered to be doing FAO work the entire time. The Navy is very similar. Their accessions are a little bit different than the way the Marine Corps and the Army do it. But ultimately, once they come over to the FAO community, again, they're considered a FAO, and that's what they're going to stay in for the rest of their career. For the Marine Corps, we treat it as a graduate education program, which you get selected as between 4 and 7 years is what we're supposed to be selecting officers to come, and they start their Naval Postgraduate School, their language school, and then 1 year of in-region training. In order to maintain competitiveness for promotion at that point, after they kind of reach the height of their FAO experience, their FAO training, I should say, we send them back to their primary MOS, because the last thing we want to have is somebody that tops out as a captain or a major. So they have to get back, they have to get their relevant primary MOS experience, and then after that, they come back to us for a FAO payback tour. That causes all kinds of challenges from a program management perspective, because we don't have it's very difficult for us to forecast with any kind of certainty what billets are going to be available for the FAOs 6 years from when they're originally selected. So that's kind of the timeline. So just to give a firm example, the Marines that were just selected on this year's Commandant's Education Board, we go through and we take those 25 Marines, we look at what their background is, what regions they want to study, and then we try to rack them and stack them based on needs of the Marine Corps. Well, needs of the Marine Corps should ideally be what billets are going to be available when they're coming due for doing their utilization tour. However, since that's 7 years from now, it's almost impossible for us to know which billets are actually going to be open. So that means we have to operate under commander's intent and say, okay, we know that Indo-PACOM is the priority region, is the priority theater for the Marine Corps right now, so we're going to make 50% of the FAOs that we have selected, we're going to make them Indo-PACOM aligned, either 8243 or 8248. And then 25% is going to be going to UCOM, either 8242 or 8247. And then the remaining 25% are split between Africa, CENTCOM, and LATAM. And that just doesn't marry up well with the billets that are actually going to be available. So without geeking out too much, it creates a reliability issue when the MAR4s or the MEFs, whoever, when they're depending on getting these billets filled, and I can't fill them because we're creating so many Indo-PACOM aligned FAOs, and we're just barely able to meet that. It creates there's a reliability issue that they can't reliably get their FAOs, and to me that causes a huge programmatic problem.
Absolutely, and more than just the administrative side. When you have turnover in a region every few years, I imagine that causes friction, especially when we have this focus on partners and allies and the new concept for stand-in forces, having Marines deploy all over the world at any time. It makes a lot of sense to have, experts in that region that have developed relationships over years and years. So with that, what type of friction occurs when we have so much turnover in the regions?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, and I'm not sure if I'm not addressing the question, then pose it to me again. But I think one of the biggest issues that we have is that there is oftentimes not a very good understanding by the Marines and probably other services as well, but kind of the general purpose force on what our role is, in the greater U.S. strategic context. So when as a new assistant OPSO, the idea that we could just go into any country and set up camp and start doing things was kind of that was the mindset of the senior leadership, that we could just go in and we could do this and we could do ISR or have drones flying and all of this stuff. The requirement to coordinate that stuff with Department of State and other entities is something that a lot of times gets lost. And so with the stand-in forces, I think one of the trickiest things will be having somebody that understands what the Marine Corps is trying to do in support of national objectives, but also understands how to put that to the decision makers on the country team, the ambassador, the senior defense official, and to some extent maybe even the COCOM as well. But understanding how to take what the Marine Corps wants and needs done and getting that translated to the decision makers within the embassy, so the country team and the ambassador. And we have to do it in a way that we are not directing. We don't have the ability to direct the ambassador. We have to do it in a spirit of cooperation, and we have to show value in what we're trying to do. And that's the thing that's important, in my opinion, for having FAOs, or at least some kind of embassy team representation. How that looks, stand-in forces is a very difficult concept to realize, I think, in some ways. I absolutely think it's the right thing to do, but when you talk about having that wide of a footprint operating autonomously across, such a large region, and you're, absolutely in a lot of different people's backyards, there's certainly a lot of coordination that needs to go on for that, and I think FAOs would be an essential part in making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. For listeners that aren't familiar, in December 2021, the Marine Corps published a concept for stand-in forces, which called for Marines to operate in contested environments in small but lethal low-signature units as the leading edge of the maritime defense in depth. So Lieutenant Colonel Dellow just kind of discussed how FAOs can help facilitate that for deploying units. How do you see deploying units best utilizing FAOs? If you are, let's say, an infantry battalion deploying and you're not familiar with this concept of a FAO, how would those two pieces kind of fit together?
Well, I mean, the short answer is right now they don't. The way that the FAO program is set up and the way it's written in the DoD directives is strategic enablers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that coupled with just manpower requirements, it makes it very difficult for FAOs to be at the tactical level. Now, that's not saying they can't and they shouldn't, but they're kind of at the MEF, MAR4 level, and they can be used, as direct telescopes to assist with that awareness. But ultimately, I think there are different levels of international affairs programs. So one of the ones would be the foreign area staff NCOs that we can push down to a more tactical level, and they would, ideally they would still have some of those LREC competencies to be able to navigate across many different cultures. One of the things that we, I think, run afoul of sometimes is the idea that, a FAO is just an LREC SME, that you can go in there and they're a translator. And while language capabilities are important, it's really their understanding of how it's their pull mill experience, their ability to work with partner nations, but also to work within the joint and interagency environment to get things done. There used to be the Marine Corps Security Cooperation Group that had, I think they still run the advisor course. There's a small cadre of them left. And I think that, some of the work that they did about teaching and enabling LREC understanding at the tactical level is valuable, but it is difficult to have very specific, detailed cultural knowledge of a very wide area. Because there are thousands of different cultures, spread across the Indo-Pacific and Africa and Latin America as well. So I think what we need to focus on really is perspective taking and broad cross-cultural competency, as opposed to the tempting idea that a FAO can be one shot, one kill for every different culture that's out there. It's, you're going to be a Eurasian FAO, you're going to be an African FAO. You're going to understand some of the cultural differences, but you're not an anthropologist. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that was perfect. Do you ever see a Marine Corps where FAOs are down at the tactical level, where, maybe a few years down the road we have a single track program, we're making more FAOs, and now you have a FAO that can attach to a deploying unit or is just there to receive them to make sure they're integrated into that culture, and, instead of spending months trying to get to know the key players on the ground, they can jump right in and start doing bilateral exercises?
So I kind of just had this discussion. I think if the FAO single track initiative does not go through, if for some reason the Marine Corps at the senior levels makes a decision that, no, we want to go in a different direction, I think at that point we would need to look at what it is that we really want from our FAOs and FASs. And what I mean by that is what the DoD directive tells us to do is focus on strategic level enablers. If that's not what we're really pursuing, and we do see much more value at a tactical level, then I think we would probably look at incorporating some more of that into what you just described into the Marine Corps, the training pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the biggest things about our training pipeline is that it's so long, and it can really throw a wrench into people's careers. And if it's not going to be a primary MOS, then we certainly don't want to ruin people's careers. So providing more FAOs at the tactical level, I think, would be a fallback position from if the FAO program does not go single track. They would move more towards, I think what I would recommend is, while we still have to maintain the hard standards that the SECNAV and the DoD instructions say, I think a reasonable fallback position would be to try to bring people into the program that already have a master's degree, already have some language competency, and then we focus their training on advising and security cooperation type at the more tactical level.
So the world is becoming more and more globalized, I think, and the Marine Corps recognizes that with publishing documents like Concep for Stand-in Forces, Force Design 2030. We're integrating more with the Navy, it seems like, and also allies and partners. So aside from the administrative point, would there be any opposition to a single-track program?
Right now, I don't see anything. Everything that we have, like you said, in all of the strategic and service level documents point to allies and partners, the importance of not leaving talent on the table, meaning creating multiple pathways to success. for Marines. And that doesn't always necessarily need to be a command track. There's plenty of officers that are not interested in commanding at the 05 and 06 level. They're interested in this line of work, being foreign area officers, working with international allies and partners. So I don't see in principle any pushback. I think we are having to deal with some institutional bureaucracy that just takes time to navigate. And not to mention the fact that also with all of the forced assigned stuff that's going on, bandwidth for change is pretty much at a max right now. They're trying to change, the Marine Corps is trying to make pretty massive changes. So when it comes time for us to want to have this conversation, the same folks that are helping us at CDI and MRA, they're also doing the same folks that are doing the big force design changes where battalions are changing to MLRs and they're dealing at change at a much larger level. So I also recognize that it's certainly not bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy. There's big fish to fry as well. That it's a competing interest basically.
Yeah, of course. This question may be a little too far in the future, but say the single track program is approved, do you anticipate that changing the selection process? So would low density MOSs no longer be candidates for the FAO program to ensure the Marine Corps stays well-rounded?
So there are a couple different codes that are being kicked around right now for how it would be. I think the one that makes the most sense is at some time, point to be determined yet, but sometime probably after selection to major, the officers would be given a chance to apply to transition. And of course, that's going to be at you're going to have something in there that is from your primary MOS monitor from MMOA that says, yes, you're eligible to transfer. And I don't think that it's going to be cut and dried conversation, because there are folks that are frankly going to say, look, I want to go do this. If you don't let me go do this, I'm going to get out. So you're going to lose me one way or the other. And we do, there's a huge problem with low density MOSs in the Marine Corps right now. Even at times us getting paybacks from folks that are in low density MOSs. We invest 3+ years in education in them, and then we don't ever get to utilize them because they're being told that they can't do a FAO payback tour. They have to stay in the primary MOS. So it will be part of the conversation, but I think that's something that can very easily be rounded out. We're not talking about huge numbers, so at least in the initial phasing plan, it would probably be fairly small. And I think that's something that the numbers that we're talking about are so small that MNRA would easily be able to make that adjudication.
Yeah.
You're always it is a zero-sum game in some context, so you are going to lose. You are going to have talent that wants to come over to the FAO program, and that's just something that the service ultimately has to make a decision. Is having this important enough to have some talent come over from other MOSs? Other MOSs are going to have to lose some of their talent.
Mm-hmm. And I know the FAO program has been compared to flight school, for instance. If this shifts over to flight school in the sense that the time commitment and the cost associated with creating this type of officer, if this shifts over to the single track program, do you ever see a Marine Corps where Marines come in and this is their initial MOS?
No, I don't think so. The importance of understanding what the Marine Corps is and how we work and how we operate is it's a precursor to being a FAO. And also, I think there's a level of maturity that's required that I certainly didn't have when I was a second lieutenant. But yeah, I think you have to be a good MAGTF officer first. You have to understand, you have to have a couple deployments under your belt and see how the Marine Corps does what it does, how we're different from some of the other services, why we're different, and have an understanding of that so that you can bring that understanding out to the interagency and the joint community.
Yeah, I completely agree. FAOs really are the best advocate for Marines in these foreign areas where we're deploying and have unfamiliar faces cycling throughout the country at all times.
One of the things that we get all the time is we don't want our FAOs to go native. So we want them to still be, very high quality officers. You don't want them to turn into, a diplomatic mindset where they're not Marines anymore. And I think people that say that aren't familiar with actually where our structure is in the Marine Corps. 70% of the billets that we have are in MAR-4s and MEPs. It's not like we're all out working for embassies continuously. You go and you have touch points and you serve a tour as a SCO, and you're probably going to come back and you're going to work at a MEF or a MAR-4, and then you're going to go back out and you're going to be an attaché, or you're going to be a SCO or an SDO-DAT in some other country. But the idea that we're going to lose our Marine nature, lose our greenness, I think is, it just doesn't bear out when you look at the billets that we have. There's very few options for people to go from joint or interagency billet to joint and interagency billet. You're going to come back to the Marine Corps, and you're going to serve as a Marine in a MAGTF. And that just kind of, as you said, that Marines, FAOs in particular, need to have that continual, understanding of what it is that the Marine Corps does, what the MAGTF does, and how important it is for us to fight that way. So that's not the intent. Single track is not going to change that. It's just going to provide, really, what we're looking to do is create some space in billets right now that already exist and have them coded for FAOs, so that a FAO can more reliably stay within their theater or aligned MEF.
Yeah, I think you said something huge there, that Marines aren't going to lose their greenness. You always hear that America doesn't need a Marine Corps, they want one, and FAOs are the opportunity to have other countries want United States Marines working with their militaries. I, of course, don't want to leave out our regional area officers or our foreign area staff NCOs. Lieutenant Colonel Dellow, are there any new initiatives with those programs?
I think really the FAS program, we're still coming up online. We do have a new billet that has been purchased by the Marine Corps for a foreign area staff NCO program manager. We've always had it filled in an overstaffed capacity, but now we actually have the structure for it. So I think that's an important step in professionalizing the program. And then the foreign area staff NCO program manager is currently working on a couple different initiatives to get more of our foreign area staff NCOs into OPSCO and Ops NCO billets at embassies. Right now, there's a particular push for Africa that some of the AFRICOM joint billets, I would say, are they're having a hard time filling them. So we're trying to see if that's something that we can help out with in having more foreign area staff NCOs actually in embassies, working with their counterparts in the SCO office and their FAO counterparts in the SCO and attaché offices. The RAO program, to be completely frank, the RAO program is causing, it's difficult to maintain and it's difficult to manage. When the original program was stood up, I think the idea was to get people with some of the regional understanding and background without the full training pipeline of a foreign area officer. Unfortunately, with a lot of the things that have happened in the last couple of years, creating a RAO has almost become more of a career liability than a FAO has. We just, in our interviews in the last couple of days, we've had Marines that are going to be between NPS and their FAO or have a RAO payback tour. They're going to spend their entire time as a major out of their primary MOS. And I know that's something that talent management is trying to change. I'm just a little wary when that is actually going to be recognized on the board. And the last thing I want to do is see somebody punished for doing a program that the Marine Corps told them to do. So, a long way of getting around to the fact that if the FAO single track initiative goes through, I think one of the things that we would do is bring over RAOs into the FAO program and stop training RAOs in the capacity that we are right now. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the primary one is it creates a more singular focus for us that, foreign area officers are, the capstones for pole mill and international engagement for the Marine Corps, and there's a singular path to do that, as opposed to trying to create these two different ones that, frankly, they kind of get the worst of both worlds, if that makes sense. They don't get the full training and scope of a foreign area officer, but they're suffering a lot of the same career setbacks because they're not able to spend time in their primary MOS when they need to.
Yeah, of course. So if you brought RAOs over to the FAO program, does that mean majors would have the opportunity to be selected for FAOs, or would they have to be selected in the 4 to 7 year time frame that FAOs are currently selected?
Yeah, that's the big discussion right now. I think there's going to have to be some just straight up transfer, folks that already have the MOS, whether they're FAOs or RAOs. There's going to have to be some process for us to do that, and that would, I think, be at a major level. What it looks like from an accessions point of view, we're still working through that. So obviously we wouldn't select any more people to be RAOs, but I think what we're discussing right now is probably when you would come over to be a FAO, instead of like where you are in your career, you'd be further to the right. So probably looking to start your FAO training, as closely as we can to your selection to major. That would give us, approximately 6 to 7 years, so a good full two, almost 3 tours out of you as a foreign area officer in a foreign area officer billet before you can be eligible for retirement. So that's part of the back and forth that we're going on right now. Is we want to take folks that have had a proven track record in the Marine Corps and are MAGTF officers and understand how things work, but at the same time, we don't want to take folks that are too senior and don't have at least 2 or 3 tours in them. So that's definitely part of the discussion right now, and I think the initial phasing would be, folks at the major and even lieutenant colonel level could transfer over. It's the accessions part. How are we going to bring in the study track folks? That's still up for discussion, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see what happens with the program within the next year or two. Lieutenant Colonel Dellow, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity, and we need to get other FAOs on here. I think Colonel Perry, the senior Marine here at NPS, it would be a great candidate. So he said last night that he'd be interested in doing one, so I'll put in a plug for it.
Absolutely. Anyway, Lieutenant Colonel Dellow, thank you so much for the conversation today. Like I said, I'm excited to see what happens with the FAO program and the Marine Corps. This is just another opportunity to show not only America, but the entire world why Marines are fantastic. So thank you again for the conversation, and I look forward to having maybe you or someone else on in the future.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us in the Trident Room. For more information about today's guests and topics, please visit the show notes. The Trident Room has been brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Alumni Association and Foundation. For questions, comments, and suggestions, please email us at tridentroompodcasthost@nps.edu and find us online at nps.edu/Trident Room Podcast.